Thank you for coming. I hope you can hear me in the back row. Thank you. And welcome to my presentation called Rainforests. Today we'll be talking about really how much longer will rainforests be around? And that's a debatable question that it's kind of like a game playing thing that really two can play at that game. And we're talking about why a lot of these rainforest animals are singing the blues. Today we'll define and identify rainforests, the plants and animals and people who live in them, and major man-made problems that affect them. And we'll concentrate and focus on parrots, chocolate, and cocaine. A rainforest is the oldest living ecosystem on our planet. The tropical rainforest is a place that gets between 98 to 117 inches of rain a year. The average temperature is between 70 and 85 degrees. It has a bit of a dry season, and the temperature pretty much stays on a level course. Tropical rainforests are generally 10 degrees north of the equator and 10 degrees south of it. It's a band of over 3,000 miles, particularly in here and in here, and it's framed by the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn here that extend all the way. They are found in many continents around the world. The largest is in the Amazon River Basin, which is 1 billion acres, that takes in the countries of Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana. Also in the Congo River Basin in western coastal Africa, like Sierra Leone, Guyana, Cameroon, Ghana, Togo, Nigeria, Gabon, and Equatorial Guinea. Also in Southeast Asia, like in India, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, Burma, the Philippines, Borneo, and Indonesia, plus Guinea and Madagascar. Why, there's even one, and found a new one through satellite mapping in Mozambique. It's on top of a 2,000-foot mountain, and it's a small one up there called Mount Lico. And generally, most rainforests are in South America, about a little less than half, about a third in Africa, and the rest in Malaysia, etc. There are 4 main layers of a rainforest. The top layer is called the Emergent Layer that rises above the canopy. It rises 165 feet, or 16 stories or more, and must be able to withstand the heat and high winds. Butterflies, eagles, and bats live in the topmost part. The next layer from under that is called the upper canopy, or the canopy layer, and it is 100 to 164 feet tall, about 10 to 16 stories tall. This layer gets the most light and mostly prevents the sun from reaching the subsequent lower levels. The trees have large, broad, waxy leaves, and the leaves have long tips on their end that reduce standing water on them, thereby reducing fungus and mold growing on the leaves. Actually, because of the foliage density, a drop of rainwater takes 10 minutes to filter its way to the forest floor. In this area, a wide spectrum of animal species live there, like monkeys, tree frogs, toucans, because food is abundant here. 25% of all insect species live in this layer. Sometimes rainforests are called cloud forests because each tree can excrete 200 gallons of water a year, and with the heat and humidity, this creates a thick cloud that shrouds the forest year-round. The third layer from the top, or the lower 100 feet, is called the understory, and only 10 to 15% of the sunlight gets to this dense region. Snakes like boa constrictors, birds, insects, jaguars, lizards live there. The leaves here are broad to catch the limited light and to collect water. Underneath this area is a shrub area where larger bushes abound. The bottom layer is called the forest floor. It has dense undergrowth, and only 2% of the light gets down to this level. Fungus and decaying plants and ants like leafcutter ants and crawling insects are found, plus scavengers. There is poor soil here as the high rainfall leaches out minerals and essential nutrients from the soil. Also, many trees have broad buttress-like trunks that act as anchors to combat high winds, plus aid more surface area with expansive root systems to get more water. These trees produce a lot of fruits and seeds and able to maximize future seedlings. This is the kapok tree, which its bark has some medicinal qualities that we'll talk about in a little bit. Some facts about rainforests: 40 to 70% of all biotic species are indigenous to rainforests. More than 1/2 of all plant and animal species live here. 6% of the Earth's land is now tied up in habitats, but before it used to be 14%. Now they constitute 2.5 million square miles. However, it was once covered 6 million square miles. In other words, there used to be 6 trillion trees. Now there's been reduced to 3 trillion trees. In just 4 square miles of rainforest, you get 1,500 different kinds of flowering plants, 750 different types of trees, 400 species of birds, and 150 species of butterflies. That's how diverse it is. Plus, it takes 130 trees to produce enough oxygen for one person to breathe. Actually, each tree takes in 48 pounds of carbon. These trees are a carbon sink and take in carbon dioxide and give us back over 20% of the oxygen we so need. Forests are really the lungs of our planet. These forests regulate temperature and weather patterns around the world and influence regional and global weather cycles. Regarding deforestation, now we'll get into that. Farming, grazing of livestock, logging, mining, and drilling account for 1/2 of all worldwide deforestation. Removing trees takes away the canopy, which blocks the sun's rays and retains heat at night. Trees and plant growth also hold in soil so it doesn't get washed away in heavy rainstorms. They maintain water supplies by absorbing rainfall and releasing it into streams, minimizing floods, washed out areas, and soil depletion. And in this photo, as we can see here, that about 1/2 of this mountainside has been deforested and used for plantation, a couple thousand acres. Clearly, this does not hold the rain. When it rains, the soil gets washed away and ends up in this kind of river system where it's difficult for animals to drink from it, any animals that live in it, and any humans that consume it. The mountain will end up being eroded and just going downstream throughout the centuries. Between 1990 and 2016, we lost 520,000 square miles of forest. 20% of the Amazon rainforest has been destroyed in the last 50 years. If tropical rainforests were a country, it would rank 3rd in carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, ranking just behind China and the United States. Deforestation makes Brazil the 4th largest greenhouse gas emitter. The loss of forests accounts for 15% of the global greenhouse annually. Remember, the carbon dioxide goes into the air and acts like a blanket to keep the heat in. And since the growth gets burned and doesn't hold the carbon dioxide anymore, this is the problem. It's called slash and burn. Clearing rainforest releases 86 times more carbon than any kind of fuel benefits. Thousands of football fields of forest are lost every day. Dead trees in the Amazon emit 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the air, and generally put about 40 billion into the air worldwide. In the last 40 years, we've lost the area we've lost the area the size of California in the last 40 years. In the next 20 years, we expect that to double. And this is what this looks like. It's pretty sad. One economic reason for this is that land taxes in Brazil are almost non-existent. It's 25 cents to $1 for an acre. As we can see here, this kind of mountain has been severely deforested, and what took nature tens of thousands of years to really build up will just be washed away in a couple hundred years. But it really should look like this, and it doesn't. And clearly, when you take away a lot of forest, what happens is animals can't live there. People who depend on living there can't live there either. And the native people have a problem living there. And for what I'm talking about, climate change, etc., this is a political football, and it came up, the climate assessment change, national climate assessment was released a year ago, and this was agreed upon by over 300 scientists from NASA and NOAA, and they all agreed on the principles that I've been talking about, this and oceans last time we talked about, that we are directly responsible for the most part with the climate change. This was buried in what they call a Friday news dump, and any administration does this, is when they have information you don't want to know about or it contradicts their particular agenda, they put it on this news chain late on the afternoon and nobody picks it up. This is called kind of like a white lie. There are many animals that live in the rainforest. 80% of the Earth's land animals live in forests and rainforests. Altogether, there are 1.5 million species that live there. 1 million of them are endangered. And like in India, there are tigers. And there used to be 100,000 tigers in India alone 100 years ago. That is now reduced to 3,500. In other words, India, because of its growth, etc., loss of habitat, has lost over 96% of its tigers that we all see in zoos. There are also sloth bears in India, deer and great hornbills. In Borneo, Sumatra, and New Guinea, there are orangutans, clouded leopards, elephants, rhinoceros, and proboscis monkeys. And we'll go through some of them that live there, like the piranha in South America, the tapir in South America, the blue morpho butterfly in Guinea, South America, the lemur, the caiman, and these forest elephants. They're a little bit they're in the Congo, and they're a little bit smaller than the ones we see in zoos. And they live directly in the forest, and they eat fruit and seeds and twigs and leaves. And they come out to open areas to dig in the soil for salt. So they come out in the open now and then. 1/2 of these animals have been decimated from poaching alone. And the okapi, they live in Central America and is a relative of the giraffe. Central Africa is a relative of the giraffe. The West Indian manatee lives on the northeast shores of Brazil and gets up to 1,000 pounds and are 10 feet wide. The three-toed sloth lives mainly in trees, eating leaves, twigs, and fruit. It moves so slow that algae grows on it, and it can take up a month to digest a meal. And the United States Postal Service models its efficiency on this animal. And the capybara is the world's largest rodent. It gets up to 2 feet tall and weighs 100 pounds. The poison dart frog is used to extract a poison which coats the tip of blow darts used for hunting by native Indians. And this is what happens when a frog swallows a strawberry. And the scarlet macaw has a powerful beak that can open fruits and seeds. Now we'll discuss a little bit here about parrots. Parrots are an important part of the rainforest ecosystem. They're hatchlings, and their eggs are eaten by lizards and snakes. Parrots themselves are hunted by boa constrictors in the trees, and in the air, parrots are hunted by eagles, hawks, and owls. And parrots also eat a lot of seeds. So when parrots fly around, and then they have, in their droppings, they have seeds in their droppings, and this then helps stimulate other trees or other plants to grow in other areas because of those seeds, how they're disseminated. This helps in diversity. More about parrots later on. And the hollered monkey can be heard up to 2 miles away and often plays on the squares here at night. And the giant anteater eats 30,000 insects a day and lives on the grasslands and swamps from Belize to Argentina. And lastly, the green anaconda can be up to 30 feet long, 12 inches in diameter, and weigh up to 500 pounds, and is stealthy in water. Rainforests are important because they harbor endangered animals, provide food, timber, medicines, and essential products. They regulate Earth's climate, produce oxygen and rainfall, plus store carbon. It's far better for the plants to store carbon than for the carbon to be stored in our oceans, which causes excess acidity. Now we're going to talk about some man-made problems. One of them is logging. In Amazon, most logging is illegal with no replanting. For every tree commercially removed, 27 trees are damaged, 40 meters of road is created, and 600 square meters of canopy is exposed. In the search for valuable hardwood, there's been over 100,000 miles of roads created in the Amazon area. Remember, the Amazon area is 10 times the size of Texas. Also, logs then are burnt to make charcoal for pig iron production, and carbon dioxide is released when they are cut down or left to rot or decay. And this also has impact on land temperatures. When you take away the forest in the area shown here, the temperature ends up rising. This is because there's nothing to block the sun. It gets absorbed in the soil. And also cloud cover decreases in the same kind of area, which means that it doesn't rain as much because there's no humidity. The cloud cover is less. Now, how does this relate to people? Well, back about 800 or 900 AD, the Mayans were flourishing in the Yucatan Peninsula, which is southern Mexico. And they had a very large populations, tens of thousands of people living in these main kind of cities. And they built these huge temples, dozens of them, that were 100 to 200 feet tall. They built them out of limestone, but in order to keep them together, they needed mortar. To make mortar, they had to take, to get 1 square meter of mortar, they had to take 20 trees and burn them. So over hundreds of years, the Mayans took these trees down in the Yucatan Peninsula, and they deforested the area, and what that did is it made it hotter, and it also decreased the rain. They used obviously when they planted, maize was their main product that they lived by, their main crop, and that got decimated, and also the water in the cisterns that they had in the caves also was depleted. So the Mayans then actually abandoned their cities around 800 or 900 AD, and they had to live elsewhere because they created their own eco-catastrophe. And if you go to these ruins and take the tours of them, the tour guides will all tell you that about what happened there, the same story. Another problem is cattle ranching. Raising beef for slaughter needs 10 times as much land than growing grain. Each cow needs dozens of acres of land to graze, plus they each consume thousands of gallons of water. By the 1980s, 85% of Costa Rica's rainforests were cut down for beef production to make hamburgers in the United States, particularly for McDonald's. 40% of the deforested land in Brazil was made for cattle ranching. Between 1996 and 2006, an area the size of Portugal was carved out for cattle ranching in the Amazon basin. There are now 200 million cattle in Brazil, but Brazil's population is 210 million people. So clearly there are as many cattle as there are people there. In Brazil, pasture land outweighs cropland by 5 times. Now the Brazilian government had a policy back which was that new land policies that require 80% of investment lands to be left as forests. This changed under the last administration, and it became liberalized, so liberalized that the farmers there who need the land for grazing took advantage of this, and 80,000 fires were in the Amazon basin by the summer of 2019. That means in just 8 months, there was like 10,000 fires a month there. And this created a worldwide concern and created an eco-catastrophe in the area. Remember, it's very difficult to fight these fires when there's no real airstrips, no real roads, and when it takes hours to get from one place to another place. And what this looked like was this. You could see the smoke from space, And this is the number of fires that they had in the dots here. This was so serious that the IMF gave Brazil $40 million to fight this, all because of a liberalized land policy. Another problem is that South America has a perfect climate conditions for growing soybeans. They need temperatures between 55 and 70 degrees in the winter, and in the summer between 75 and 90 degrees, with rainfall of more than 60 inches a year. Since 1990, the Amazon soy farming expanded 14% a year and now covers 200 million acres. And what's going on here is that 80% of the soy is for cattle feed, and the rest is used in fast foods and by supermarket chains. That means soy is fed to cattle and it's fed to chickens. And it's done that so they grow faster. Cows have no business eating protein. They eat grass or herbivores. Chickens just eat, well, seeds and grain. But if you give that to them, the soy, they grow quicker, go to market, and you get more money out of it. So clearly, soy is in, something like in our pork meat, they give it to pigs, in cheese from cows, in chicken breasts, in yogurt from cow's milk, pork sausage. So it's in everything, and 60 million tons are grown in the Amazon basin there. Actually, soy also uses high amounts of agrochemicals like fertilizers that carried into streams, causing contamination. However, in 2006, there was a moratorium placed on soy due to deforestation. Companies would buy soy from soy traders who get their supply from farmers who grow it. Greenpeace was responsible for this moratorium, and now major companies have followed suit. Well, in the United States they have, but Brazil then takes the 60 million tons and sells it to India or China. So it's really the same thing. Another problem is palm oil, which is farmed in Indonesia and is a vegetable oil that is cheap and high in saturated fats. It is used in commercial food industry and also used in cosmetics and candies. In Malaysia and Indonesia, hundreds of football fields of rainforests are cut down daily to make way for palm oil producers. This makes Indonesia one of the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. A 2.5 acre of peat forest releases 6,000 tons of carbon dioxide. And altogether, 25 million acres have been cleared. And what happens is that each palm oil tree needs a 10-foot wide diameter of space to grow. Palm oil produces 10 times more oil than soy or sunflowers. And the lifespan for palm oil plantations are 25 to 30 years. After that, the palm oil trees are cut down and land is restored. However, this makes for this creates for these rainforests then to be biological deserts. Nothing can really grow there anymore, and it looks like this. All just one product now. This is all for just palm oil. And it looks like this is about the size of your neighborhood. There are hundreds of these in Malaysia of this kind of size. And what it looks like is the seeds that are taken and ground up, and then they are made into an oil which looks like this. I don't think anybody would want to have this in their frying pan in the morning to make their breakfast. And it used to be just 250,000 tons were produced annually of this, and now it's up to 60 million tons. And what happens in Borneo, like in the 1950s, it used to be pristine, and now it's reduced to this. And what happens is the animals who live there, like the orangutan, cannot live there anymore. They have to be only taken to zoos. In the future, that's what you will be seeing, these animals in zoos or stuffed in museums because they no longer exist. Rainforest products also include, there's also products that they develop in rainforests, like rubber, bananas, pineapple, and cocaine. Rubber plantations are usually found in Southeast Asia, like in Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar, Thailand, Borneo, Java, and Sumatra. Thailand leads the way with 4 million tons of rubber alone, and Indonesia with 3 million tons. To put a face on this, and to make it real, this man, Chico Mendes, fought hard and brought consciousness about rainforests to people's attention. He's the one that organized rubber workers into union, became unionized. And he was murdered 30 years ago by people, by ranchers who live there. But now because of him, we have rubber trees in specific plantations instead of sporadically, haphazardly scattered around and illegally scattered around. So sometimes it takes a hero to do this. There's also banana plantations in Central America that were once rainforests. Do you know the average person eats 100 bananas a year? And this is another problem. This is a cocoa. It's grown in the Congo, generally speaking, and they are grown in these big pods on trees that you see hanging down. And inside each pod are seeds, and they have between 20 and 60 cocoa seeds in those pods. And it takes about 30 or 40 of these pods to be able to produce 1 pound of chocolate. That means it takes about 1,000 seeds from these kind of pods to make 1 pound of chocolate. Now the world consumes 5 million tons of chocolate a year. That's 10 billion pounds. That's clearly about 1.5 pounds for every person on this planet. And how this is done is that in order to get this, the child labor is used, even by the big companies. These kids really should be in school, but in order to make money for their families, they do this. So in order to avoid this, try to buy things called the fair trade label. That is, rainforest products like bananas, chocolate, coffee, tea, sugar, and cotton have this label on it. Farmers get a fair price for their crops they produce. The workers on the plantation have decent health and safety standards, and no child labor or forced labor is allowed. So this is hard to find in this area, this kind of label, but it is possible. So fair trade does help the community where these people live in. And it provides schools and hospitals and roads, so the money gets recycled back to where they live. Also, there are many tribes living in the rainforest. Millions of people live in them. The 3 main tribes are the Pygmy tribe in northern Congo, the Hutu tribe in New Guinea, and the Yanomami tribe in northern Brazil and Venezuela. These are all proud people that have been living this way for thousands of years. Remember, 90 indigenous tribes have been wiped out since 1990. And we'll talk about the Pygmy tribe first. It consists of people less than 5 feet tall, and then enables them to rapidly displace heat and move easily through the hot African forests. They live in nomadic tribes of 15 to 70 and change locations throughout the year. They live in Western Africa, the DRC, Congo, Uganda, Cameroon, and Rwanda. They hunt wild game, gather fruit and wild plants plus honey. Then they trade the honey and wild game for other necessary provisions. The women gather and the men hunt 45 different kinds of animals with bows and arrows. 900,000 of them live in Central African forests, and most of them live in the Congo. There are 65,000 Hutu who live in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, They eat pigs, yams, forest game, and cassowaries. In the Amazon basin, there are 400 to 500 indigenous tribes there, and there are 180 different languages spoken. The Yanomami tribe has between 20 and 32,000 people in it. And they grow their own fruits, vegetables, beans, berries, corn, papaya, and bananas. They live in bamboo houses with straw, leaves, or palm trees as a roof, and when the roofs get infested with insects, they burn them. The numbers are decreasing due to deforestation. There used to be 10 million Indians living in the Amazon. Today it is fewer than 700,000. And the numbers are decreasing due to deforestation from oil development, narco-trafficking, mining, and lumber cutting. These are some of being small helps out living in a rainforest. And now we'll get back to parrots again. Actually, there's a problem taking animals from rainforests. There are now more parrots in Mexico City than there are in Central America and in the South America. These parrots are taken to Mexico City and then distributed to the United States, Canada, and Europe. In the past, before the WCA was implemented, WVCA, which is the Wild Bird Conservation Act, hundreds of thousands of birds were taken. This has now changed to about 70,000 a year. And most of them die in captivity when being transferred. And I should be the last one talking to you about this because there is a club here in the villages called Parrots Are Us. They meet once every month in Laurel Manor. And their inaugural meeting was about, they had a state attorney come in to talk about what to do with your parrot when you pass on. In their September meeting, they had one dealing with parrot bingo. So parrots have no business being in your living room watching TV with you. They belong in the wild and they are a small but essential part of the rainforest system. Moving on. Number of animals hunted annually, we can see here, is very significant, especially in Africa area. And this I got from an article just in October. 6 million tons are hunted illegally, and they are then sold as bushmeat to families who cannot afford to get meat or cannot get to a store. And moving on to medicinal plants, there are 3,000 plants that are active against cancer cells, and 70,000 of them are found in rainforests. We have only tested a few percent of these, or 70% of them are found in rainforests, I'm sorry. We've only tested a few percent of these for medicinal use, and we are now losing dozens of species of plants, trees, and shrubs yearly that have medicinal qualities that could save or ease the pain of suffering and etc. And now these are on the edge of mass extinction. This is the wasai. This is the root from a wasai tree. It's a diuretic to help with kidney health. This is cordonocello, which is used as an anesthetic for injury or illness. Rubbing its leaves on a wound make it go numb. And curara is a poison used in the hunting of animals in South American rainforests in low dosage amounts in treating testicular inflammation, enlarged prostate, kidney stones, and fever. The Tuari tree bark helps fight infections, cancerous cells, tumors, and inflammation. Is also an antibacterial fungicide. The cinchona tree bark makes quinine, which helps cure malaria and blood disorders. And again, the cocoa tree is used in 155 different chemicals or compounds from its bark, seeds, leaves, and fruits. Cocoa butter is used in fine soaps and skin creams and treats eczema and acne. The rosy periwinkle is found in Madagascar. It treats diabetes, childhood leukemia, and medicines like vincristine and vinblastine that give a 95% survival rate using these drugs. The Pacific bleeding heart is found in the Pacific Northwest. Its tincture is extracted with and to treat anxiety and to externally treat bruises and sprains. And the kapok tree we talked about before is used with headaches and type 2 diabetes. And this is the annatto tree. It's found from Mexico to Brazil, and it's used as a red or orange dye and a medicine to help with diabetes, hepatitis, and malaria. So quite a number of rainforest plants are used for medicinal purposes. To be specific, 25% of all modern medicines come from rainforest plants. Some of them we talked about before: cinchona tree, periwinkle plant, and the clavilla plant. Also, there are many different kinds of species of plants that live there, like this corpse flower that emits a strong odor so that insects can be attracted to it. It's a carnivorous plant. And the orchids, which is used to get vanilla, and bromelates that are used to collect, actually they collect water. Animals drink from these kind of areas on it, and they have a root that's very tasty, especially for bears, and has a lot of sugar in it. And we get a lot of products from rainforests, as we discussed, like rubber, vanilla, chocolate, etc. And they have quite a number of products that come from it. And there are 3,000 edible fruits in the rainforest, but only 200 are used in the Western world. The natives use about 2,000 of them, by the way. We still get 80% of our dietary fruits from rainforests, like oranges, lemons, grapefruit, avocado, figs, bananas, and pineapples. Really, most of the world just eats 5 or 6 different animals and about 12 to about 15 different kind of farm products. The animals we mainly eat and find in the grocery store for consumption are beef, which is cattle, pork, which is pig, poultry, which is chicken and turkey, and we have also fish, and sometimes lamb. And the 12 products that we are mainly grown in the world, used for consumption, are rice, potatoes, rye, wheat, soy, corn, barley, oats, etc. Please note that 1 acre of rainforest yields $600 in timber. The same acre yields 1 acre yields $400 when converted to grazing fields. Yet that same acre used for renewable medicinal plants yields $2,400. So if we leave it alone, then we get more money. But what they never talk about in these articles on the web or in books or any other place is that you get the most money making cocaine. And you get over tens of thousands of dollars per acre doing that. And this is rarely discussed in polite company, how cocaine is made. Cocaine is made from coca leaves that grow on these bushes. Mainly in Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru, they send the United States 300 tons of cocaine a year. The United States uses 1/3 of all the cocaine in the world, and we're only 5% of the world's population. And how they are made is from these coca bushes here. These leaves appear about 6 times a year, and they are taken off, and then they actually, to make that kilo, you need over 2,000 pounds of those leaves. They are taken and they are dried for 24 hours, and the leaves are spread on a tarp and mixed up with a weed whacker. And then ammonia, lime, and cement powder and diesel fuel is sprinkled on this. Then they are put into these kind of large drums here, and they are soaked with gasoline. This then is drained off, and the leaves are removed, and the gasoline is removed, and ammonia is then added to separate the cocaine, and this is how it turns white. And then sulfuric acid then is added to the cocaine gasoline liquid, and then sodium permanganate is added in, and caustic soda then is added to the cocaine mixture. It is filtered and stirred into a paste, and this is how we get just 1 kilo of cocaine to this, and it's dried up into a brick-like form. To make crack cocaine, you crystallize the cocaine, and then that's heated, and then you inject that into your body. It's hard to believe that people put this into their bodies. So that's how cocaine is really made in the forest regions. Gold can be found in rainforests throughout the world and can be extracted from ore using mercury, potassium cyanide, and sulfuric acid, and some metal oxides. For every 3 pounds of mercury used to process gold, one gets a kilo of gold, about 2 pounds. These toxic chemicals are just dumped into the rivers and streams after their industrial use, which adversely affects wildlife and sometimes people living downstream. In Guyana, in 1995, 1 billion gallons of cyanide was spilled and released into a stream. However, after this, the Guyana government still granted mining concessions to the same company who had created this eco-catastrophe. Open pit mining or wildcat mining or cut, dig, and go or small-scale operations are very common in wilderness areas in the rainforest. They dig craters between 10 and 30 feet down, and then blast craters with pressurized water, and then drain and sift to get the gold out. This kind of mining releases tons of mercury every year into streams, about 30 tons, and this illegal gold mining operations has increased by 400% in this century alone in Peru. In 2013, there were 50 small-scale mining operations in Peru alone with no permits. Slave workers or forced laborers and children often work for gold lords in the areas. These gold lords bribe government officials to gain access to areas. And it used to be just a few thousand acres in the rainforest. Now it's multiplied so much because gold is worth $1,400 an ounce. And this leaves, they also dredge for it in rivers. And this is what it looks like when they're done. Actually, when the gold and coal mines cease operations, the sites are abandoned and then create environmental eyesores, which increase local flooding, mudslides, erosion, and loss of habitat. Now we'll move on to temperate rainforests. They have rainfall over 55 inches a year, with temperatures ranging from 39 degrees to the 60s, mid-60s. Some of these forests are in the Pacific Northwest in North America and extend 1,200 miles from Alaska to Oregon. They have a milder, moisture climate with pine trees and are often found close to oceans. There are other kind of forests that we in the Northeast, particularly people who live here, are used to. The temperate forests, which contain deciduous and conifer trees. Deciduous trees have leaves that fall off with these kind of temperatures and with these kind of animals and with these kind of simple plants that live on rocks and trees. Yeah, we live, right now, we live in a temperate savanna scrub. The villages has consumed tens of thousands of acres and has contributed tens of thousands of tons of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere by taking away the plants that conserve carbon dioxide. This is called terraforming. And one of the issues here, and not much discussed, is how long will this expansion continue? How long will the terraforming go on without public input, without thinking? Are we to expand from here to Ocala or from here to Orlando? The future is up to us to decide, not land developers. Also in the future, rainforests will become really amusement park areas with a very large type Disneyland kind of experience that they would go to. The rainforests will be cut down by a fifth of their size in the future, and they'll have trams going through them showing what it does. Also, we also put a lot of blame on countries like Brazil and Malaysia for their massive deforestation, but we never talk about what's done in this country. We have also eliminated millions of acres of rainforest, of forest, and of course it's gone to planting, but how many Walmart parking lots do we need? How many roads to nowhere? How many strip malls? If you take a ride from here to Leesburg, it's all strip malls going here eastbound. So we need to take responsibility for the things that we say and not just blame other countries for it. And I'd rather live in an unmanaged forest than a managed forest. Because we live in the Anthropocene era now. In the last 100 years, we have taken away 1/2 of all the species of plants and animals who live in them. So, in the words of Toucan Sam and George of the Jungle, we all need to hang in there and do our best to hang tight and hang in there. And thank you. That is the end of my presentation.